I'm sure people will jump in a second. But if you have not, I'm just going to start this right now with no one in the chat and say, hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Indie Hour. It is a special episode today, as we are doing this live with a guest. We haven't done this before, so of course there was massive technical errors. We've had to start this about a dozen times, and Mike has been very patient with me as I juggle both a sick kid and my own technical issues to bring us Planet Smasher Games' own Mike Hutchinson to talk about his brand new game of Drunken Orc and Dice Towers. It's words I don't know where that sentence is going word to word almost sometimes. But it's Space Gits, man. Space Gits. And we're joined right now in the chat by Ryan Dunphy, fellow game designer. And we've got, of course, some Space Gits in the background there for people to check out. But this is your latest offering, man. And I am looking at the Space Gits Kickstarter preview right now. We got art by Till Forster, models by Tyler Russo, and some fantastic illustrations. This is like Where's Waldo meets orcs. It's incredibly cool looking. Let me see if I can share my screen.
I'm glad you shouted that, because that was one of the inputs to Till's illustration work on the cover image. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be like, yeah, you know, like a city scene where you can't quite find the drunken orc you're looking for.
That's amazing. All right, so let's just share this with the crowd here so people can see what this looks like. And damn, look at this thing. Look at how cool this is. And this
so we're in preview mode. This goes up tomorrow-ish.
Yeah. And we've got some fantastic art here. So Space Gits, a skirmish game of drunk ass orcs by Gaslands designer Mike Hutchinson.
It's me.
I love the punk rock of the art. Till has done an incredible job with these illustrations. So why don't you give us the elevator pitch, man? What's the lowdown on this?
Okay, so this is a dice dexterity skirmish game. You grab 3-5 kit bashed space orcs, and then you scoot, loot, and shoot around the table. You got to grab the bottle caps, and then you got to leg it before the fuzz arrive in force to break up your party. It basically comes from an idea that I had last year whilst we were working on this textbook that we wrote, The Fundamentals of Tabletop Miniature Games Design. There's a chapter on dice mechanics. And we write in the chapter on dice mechanics. We got towards the end of that chapter and it's like, I wonder what other things you could do with dice. Like, what other affordances do dice have that you could use? And we started talking about how you could use the physical location of the dice where it lands in the player. And I started thinking, wow, that's not really been explored that much.
Yeah, the only game I can think of it is old. The only game I could think of would be Space Fleet. Space Fleet was one where you threw the dice into the dice lid to try and hit the spaceship.
Yeah.
That's a late 80s like GW game.
Yeah, so box lid off on the side, you drop the things, and where you drop is kind of how you roll the dice. But even that, like, it isn't rolling directly into the play area where the dice and the miniatures interact directly.
Yeah.
And so that idea led me down this line of like, ooh, okay, well, you could roll dice into the play area and you could move towards the dice, and maybe you move as far as the number that got rolled. But if you roll a few dice, like, it's really hard to figure out where exactly you're going. So it's going to be like a kind of random movement game. Why would that be fun? And like, what thematic layer would go on top of that? So that's where like drunk ass orcs came from. Plus, a friend of mine had just gifted me a bunch of like original 80s those single monopose rifle or Rogue Trader guys.
Yeah, the original Rogue Trader box that the metal guys Fruck and Thrug in the Battle of the Farm. Was that?
Yes, exactly, those guys. And he was
Space Orc Raiders was the name of the box, I'm pretty sure.
Space Orc Raiders, and he'd never painted them. He's like, look, I've had these for 30 years. Let me gift them to someone who's actually going to get them painted. And little did he know that about 9 months later, a year later, it would lead to this, my first like full-on balls to the walls Kickstarter in an attempt to survive as an indie designer.
Nice. So you said there was physical models as well. Let's have a look at the page again. Yeah. Because on top of the rulebook, obviously you're doing some additional stuff here where you want to actually have some figures, and they are sculpted by, I believe you said,
Cromlech. It's weird actually, because like Cromlech and I had been chatting for some other reason. Like, they got in contact with me to say like, hey, I see you're doing stuff off on the side now. Like, can we have a chat?
Yeah.
And I just said, oh, by the way, like I'm doing the Space Gits thing. Can I use some of your miniatures in the rule book? Because they're an obvious and brilliant source of
Yeah.
particularly like goofily themed orcs, like
Yeah,
the
like the one
range
here is
of
wearing the one here that we're looking at on this on the page has like the cool guy sunglasses on, the like meme sunglasses that like slide down your face, and he's got robot legs.
exactly.
These are pretty fantastic.
Yeah, but they've got like chef heads and like,
Yeah.
pilot heads and, or like, Confederate soldier heads and just like all kinds of weird stuff and doctors. And so I thought, these would be the perfect kind of things. And I'd contacted a few different like 3D STL makers to see whether, who was up for it. But like straight away, Cromlech were like, hell yeah, can we definitely get involved? And also, can we design you some exclusive miniatures? And can like we be involved because this sounds rad? Let's do it. So there's an exclusive miniature that they're offering that you can only get as part of my Kickstarter, and they designed some completely new terrain pieces. In fact, I've got them on the shelf behind me. They designed like they read the rules, the beta rules, and one of the things that you can interact with is a vending machine, and you like kick it and roll a dice, and it vends a random
See what happens. It kicks out vending stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is there's a thing that's called a teleporter loo, which they then developed a model for as well. So this is see if I can open the door. This is a full-on porter cabin loo thing.
It's the Chaos Lavatory from the 80s. That's fantastic.
I don't know what the Chaos Lavatory is.
That's an old C series Citadel miniature. There was literally it was a Chaos Lavatory. It was like a lavatory.
Okay, so we've made a callback even unknowingly.
Yeah, there's a like you are either intentionally or unintentionally doing so many like old Rogue Trader era callbacks here. It's fantastic.
Well, I guess maybe because I'm inhabiting the same psychic space. I just parallelly evolved the Chaos toilet.
Yeah, absolutely. The Chaos.
So in this case, it's a riff. It's a riff on the old, the squig teleporter because Snotling teleporter. Because with this thing, like these are great because you can put them anywhere around the mega city of Nork, and you don't even have to plumb them in. Because what happens is when you poop, it just teleports the poop somewhere else. Where does it go? I'm sorry, I can't tell you. That's a state secret.
What a wonderful thing that would be if that was the way that it actually happened.
Except it has to end up somewhere. Perhaps it goes in.
Yeah, that feels like a very like Mike Judge solution for all of that. You know what I mean? Like some kind of an idiocracy style solution for orc feces in the grim darkness of the far future.
Yeah. So Space Gits is like I'm channeling as much 2000 AD as I am like Warhammer 40,000 because like it's very much an urban setting so that I can have like the opening blurb here is like all of the warlike orcs have left the planet Crunge to go out on their raiding missions, with their massive Hulk ships and stuff because this planet is just a giant like refuge sites. This is essentially like human occupied landfill, but it's all occupied. Yeah, it's all. And because all of the big fighty orcs have gone, all the Gits, all the weedy or like invalided out Gits that are left are just running amok and causing chaos. And there's a small blue line or a thin green line, I suppose it is, of enforcers and police officers trying to keep the peace in this like continent spanning mega city. But it's hopeless and everyone's stealing TVs.
That would be such a great explanation as to why orcs from the 80s look so different from orcs from the 2000s. You know what I mean? Like all the good orcs left, and they left behind all the Kev Adams.
Yeah, all the hefty guerrilla ones are out fighting. Yeah. All of the like weedy like Gits are they're still stuck in the city.
Just left behind. Yeah. So then what's the materials pitch? Because I'm reading here it's dexterity based, obviously with the dice stacking. Miniature agnostic, use the orc miniatures that you like. 2 to 5 players, so it can be multiplayed, which is kind of a party game mentality to it. And it does feel like the dexterity stuff, when it's a party game, plays into that, right? The more it's Jenga, the more people are playing Jenga, the more fun it is because the quicker it goes.
Yeah, definitely. And like, the more I developed this game, even from the off, like I got a vibe that this was going to be a game with lots of laughing, and it would be fun if it was like Gaslands in that it just natively supported quite a few players. And like as soon as you've got this, like, so every time you activate, you stack a little dice to make a tower, and every time you take a wound, you add another dice to this tower. So you end up with this teetering tower of dice with your orc, and every time you move the orc, you got to move the dice with it. So the dice have always got to be in contact, and that means that every time you move, there's a lot of like throwing dice and it being stupid and stuff. And then when you move, like everything zooms in on that because you've got to be really careful so that
Yeah.
you don't knock it over. And then when it inevitably falls over, it's hilarious. But the fun thing is that like how you roll dice into the play area really matters because that's where you're going to move, and like what counts as falling over or like legal moving of the, like there's a bunch of things in this game which I can't really write rules for. So the game itself is like almost, like it's essentially a party game because it's kind of unlegislatable. Like there's no tournament way to play this game because it's just too janky.
Yeah. And so what you've done is you've kind of written the like code of conduct for what you do when it's your turn, but then the actual like implication of that and the kind of like the unforeseen consequences between the players is what emerges from those like codes of conduct of like what you can and can't do when you touch miniatures and how you move them around and stuff like that.
Yeah, and like so I with this like core fun engine of like it's really fun to roll the dice and move towards them and try and figure out, like it turns out there is a bit of mastery in like figuring out how to roll the dice in the right place and so forth, and how to move the models carefully. Captain Ferrite says in the comments, try to play this on a sculpted board. Now I have been playing this for over 6 months and I thought this was impossible to play Space Kits on a sculpted board, but I have discovered through my mastery that there is a way to achieve this. You can sort of carefully lift them up and hover the guy. If you hold the dice tower and the base as well, you can sort of hover them and get across rough terrain, but like it's really hard and risky.
That's really funny.
So different kinds of mastery come into Space Kits.
Yeah. And obviously like everyone's terrain collection and their like special sort of like group of orcs and stuff will dictate a little bit how this goes. Cause like I feel like the lighter plastic orcs and the wider bases might even be harder to move than the smaller guys on the smaller bases where you can kind of fit your fingers around it and hold the dice at the same time.
I make
like,
the gag in the rule book, but like like round bases with beveled edges, such as we all tend to play with, that's actually the hardest hard mode.
Because it's like trying to pick up a penny on the ground.
If you get flat-edged hexagon bases, like that's beautiful because you've got something that you've got nice straight edges to lock your dice against. So yeah,
that's so funny.
Again, 80s basing.
So I do like, obviously you've immediately got an audience because I've said this for years. There's Warhammer players and then there's orc players, and orc players will it doesn't matter what game they end up in, they always play the orcs, whatever the orcs of that game setting is, they'll be the orcs. They don't care if they
for a while they gravitated to Gaslands because
that's what I mean. Like it's almost like a genetic predisposition to be orky. So like obviously you've got your keen audience here already. They're interested in fun. They're going to model a bunch of stuff. You did say the play area is relatively small. What's the ideal play area size? Because a lot of my people are kitchen table gamers, right?
So, yeah, I mean, so like a kitchen table is actually the ideal play area because if it's got like a nice flat laminated top, then that's good. That's good. Like Gaslands, this game everything deploys from the center. So like the exact size of the table doesn't really matter and the shape of the table doesn't really matter. I play on 2 foot and 3 foot squares because that's what I've got easy access to. You won't need any more. I mean, you can play on a 4 foot table, whatever. It doesn't matter. You just play on whatever. But like cardboard, one of those cardboard 40K boards, those would be really good.
The kill team size ones? Yeah. It does feel like this could easily be imported to the bar, which is kind of almost by design. If you have a pocket full of dice and some orc miniatures, you could play this on like the hi-hats at the bar.
They'd keep falling into the beer collecting tray.
Well, the beer would just be the terrain right around which you're rolling the dice.
You'd have to build a ridge around the outside.
Yeah, a cocktail table with a nice lip. Yeah, a cocktail table with like a nice lip, basically. Like something with like a high lip would be perfect.
Oh yeah, no, actually premium Space Kits is played on one of those like lipped card tables with the felt. Yeah, that's the best way to play it.
That's advice from the designer here. So let's talk about the core mechanics then, because obviously the dice stacking is inside the core mechanics. You mentioned movement is dice roll based. So there's a bit of like RNG and chaos to how things move around. But let me give you the 2-second version here. So when it's your turn in space, so at the start of the game, you've got like 3 or 4 guys. We drop 6 bottle caps each onto the play area and they scatter wherever they land. And then we put another bottle cap in the middle as a tiebreaker. We then have to deploy outside of 4 inches from any bottle caps or each other, but we're like starting immediately all over the place. And then when it's your turn, you're going to activate an orc, then I'm going to activate an orc. When it's your turn to activate an orc, you pick one of your guys and you can keep picking the same guy that you picked last time if you want. The reason for that will become apparent in a minute.
And when they activate, they get 2 actions. And basically, an action is either scooting, shooting, or booting. And to scoot, you take 3 dice, 3d6, and you roll them into the play area. And then you have to resolve all 3 of those dice, and one at a time. You pick one of them and you move the orc that number of inches that it's rolled towards it. And if it bumps into something like a cap, you can loot it. If it bumps into a friend, you have to stop. If it bumps into a dice, you have to stop. And you have to resolve them all, and you have to move exactly as far as it said. So that can result in like you staggering around drunkenly if you roll but poorly, which is very much the point. And if you bump into an enemy Git as a result of that, then your activation ends and we go into a fight. And I'll get to a fight in a minute. But that's one action is scooting. Shooting, it's kind of the same. When you shoot, you take your bullet dice, and like a normal gun will have like 2d6, or a rifle will have 1d8. And you roll that bullet dice into the play area, and the bullet travels from your Git towards that dice, a number of inches equal to the gun's range. And then if it hits, if an orc is in the way of that line, they're the first thing hit, then they get hit. And you compare the value of the dice that's been rolled to the orc's toughness, and that gets you a big or a weak damage value. And when they take damage, then they start stacking more dice up on their tower, which means that when they get to activate, it's going to be more difficult for them to...
More precarious, yeah.
Yeah, more precarious for them to zoom around. And if you move your orc and the dice tower falls, then so does the orc. And you have to knock the orc over on his ass. And at that point, they're kind of stuck. They can't stand up of their own volition, and they can't be activated. And that's specifically to have a kind of down and not out mechanic like you'd get in a shooter video game. Yeah, so now you have to scoot one of his mates over and use the boot action that I mentioned to boot him up the arse and get him to stand up. So that means like you were trying to do this thing over here, but now this guy's fallen over, so I've got to go and sort that out. And it keeps the game quite tense because, yeah.
There's an elastic band mechanic, basically. So there's a way to come back when you start losing guys, but you're now risking someone else to go and do it and interrupting what you're trying to do, getting the bottle caps and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you also definitely want to go and boot your mate up, because if you're on the ground, an enemy Git can scoot over and stick the boot in, and that would nick one of the boss's bottle caps. So you can kind of kick a guy while he's down to start moving bottle caps from them to you. And then the last mechanical element is the fight. And the fight, I wanted it to feel like, like Skull and Roses, when you've got like a stupid macho bluffing game. That's what I wanted. And so it uses a rock, paper, scissors-ish system, but like each of the 3 outcomes has a specific tactical outcome. So you can either do thump, which just does damage, and you roll a dice depending on what weapon you've got, and it's again compare the dice number to the toughness and stack some dice up. But thump can be cancelled out by shove, which shove doesn't do any damage, but it pushes them away, which ends the fight, but also forces them to move, and then maybe that will cause them to fall over. And shove can be cancelled out by pinch, and pinch says, I'm going to steal a bottle cap from you. But of course, if you think that I'm going to steal a bottle cap from you, then you can thump me, because thump will cancel out pinch. And so there's like a fun bluffing game where, you want to be pinching and you don't want to end the fight necessarily unless you do. And if you do, then maybe you should be thumping, so you cancel. But anyway, all of that is to say that like once you've resolved that one pair of throws, if the 2 orcs are still touching and they're both standing up, then you go again and you keep fighting until someone falls over or gets shoved away.
So the goal here, obviously, in playing it, is that you have this like learning curve of what's the best way to move my models, what's the best choices for this rock, paper, scissors sort of bluffing game I'm going to do. And then you don't get a bunch of feel bads because you have 2 to 5 orcs to play with at any given time. So like when one's out, you have the opportunity to go get them back. And it feels a little Mario Kart-y, where there's like a recurrent system. So a little bit like the audience votes ended up being in Gaslands, or playing with 2 to 3 cars in Gaslands, so that like when one flipped over and exploded, you didn't feel bad and you got to keep playing. This seems to have that kind of baked into it, because it's a party game. Obviously, you don't want anyone to like just feel like they're out and done. Yeah,
and I'm 7 or 8 years longer in the tooth when it comes to games design now. So I've done a few things in this game to make it even more party gamey. So one of the things is that at the start of the game, after you drop the bottle caps, you start a 30-minute timer, on your phone with a police siren. And after 30 minutes, when the police siren goes, like that's when the fuzz are starting to arrive in force to break the party up.
The actual big orcs show up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, Officer Crunk and his boys. We'll have a look at him in a minute. after the 30-minute timer goes up, the game doesn't end instantly. You just can't boot anymore, so you can't get your boys up, and you can't dust them down for extra caps.
Oh, so it's like an overtime mechanic, basically.
Yes, it's kind of like an overtime, and at that point,
yeah.
you're like, oh, okay, because at the end of any activation, you can leg it, or when it's your chance to activate, you can leg it, which is like bottling it in Necromunda. So picking the time to bottle it's important, because if you bottle it, you have to replace any of your orcs that are within 6 inches of an enemy with one of your bottle caps. So if you spread out enough, then you can bottle it safely and escape with your loot. But if you're kind of still embroiled, then there's a cost to bottling it that you've got to sort of figure out exactly when to do it. Yeah, and so that means that the game takes about 45 minutes tops, and that's cool because I've also got a rich table dice rolling campaign system, and I want you to experience that potentially multiple times a gaming evening rather than just once.
So tell that to sort of like the tune of how much eventful stuff can happen at the post-game sequence. Because one of the great funs of the classic Orky campaign games, like Gorka Morka, obviously, is that more story can almost happen during the post-game than during the current game. How you said lots of tables, that is something that immediately gets my audience excited, because we do love a good chart and a chart to start. I mean, if you're comparing this to human-occupied landfill, then you have to roll in the chart to see which chart you start rolling your charts on.
I did actually go back and reread that earlier in the year just to see if it was still as awful as I remembered.
It's pretty great. It was the pre-generated characters that were horrifying. They were the most the equipment for the pre-generated characters was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Like one of them had just a box of fingernail clippings as one of his equipment items that you had to have for some reason. It's so stupid.
Okay, so the after party, as the post-game sequence is called, basically you do some quick maths, which means you roll a dice for every cap you've collected, and on a 6, you just get another cap. You just miscounted, so that's good. And if if your gang was much stronger than mine, then you get an underdog's bonus. But anyway, then we get to the good bit, which is each of the Gits in your gang has a little identity card, a City of Nork ID card, and on the back of that are some checkboxes for their criminal record. And in the game, you check off after the game. You check off each offense that they have done. So that's like they can have dangerous driving if they've damaged another Git whilst they were the driver of a vehicle, or looting, discharging a firearm in a public place. And like each one of these offenses that they check off gets them a chance to roll a dice, and on the roll of a 6, they get an increase to their attitude stat. And there are no saving throws in Space Gits until you start gaining attitude. And when you've got attitude, when you take damage dice, when you get given damage dice, you get to roll them, and any of them that roll under your attitude, you can just scorn them, and you just sack those off and ignore them and don't take them. So as you get more attitude, that's essentially the experience, the kind of core experience system. You're going to get a tougher orc. But once you hit attitude, I think it's 4. They get a real bad attitude, and then you have to roll to check to see whether they just can't be asked to turn up to the game.
Yeah. or they take over
that's the like longer term rubber banding.
Yeah. They get too big for the britches. They leave. That was my favorite part of the Mordheim Orcs and Goblins gang, was if the goblin ever got this guy, lad's got talent, the orcs just kill him. He just dies. The goblin rolls his last guy. He's about to become a hero, and the orcs just go, absolutely not. They snap his neck and he dies.
Actually, one of the places that this attitude system came out of, and it isn't because there's a Planet Smasher song called Bad Attitude or Too Much Attitude or something. Mm-hmm. In writing this game, I discovered there's a ska band with the same name as my design.
Of course. First of all, I did know that, because
Canadian, Ska's life.
Ska's life, obviously. And I did have some friends who went through a really heavy "it's my entire personality" ska phase when I was in high school. So
yeah, of course,
I did listen to some plans. There's also one called the Pie Tasters, so don't start a company called Pie Taster Games.
But anyway, what I was going to say is one of the lines of inquiry that the attitude system emerged from was, I was thinking about that bit in Gorka Morka where if a dude gets too much leadership, he has a fight.
They challenge you. Yeah, they challenge you for the Warband.
And that was a point where I was like, there's a thing about Space Kits that I don't want the like culture of orcs in Space Kits to kind of be anything like the culture of orcs in 40k. Like there's lots of places that I'm differentiating
Yeah.
the way that they do it.
These are
And
non-heroic. This is the
yeah,
B
and in
team.
this case, it's more like everyone is just kind of rioting around and they're just like friends in a friend group. And you know how like friends in a friend group, if one of your friends just gets a bit too big for their britches, you just kind of hammer them down so that
You
everyone's back at the
immediately
same
turn on
level.
them. That's right. Yeah, you
Yeah,
immediately
exactly.
reset
So
the
instead of like, instead of it being like the strongest, it becomes the chief alpha male stuff. It's more just like everyone's just a git to each other, so we all stay at the same grubby little
Yeah,
level.
perfect. It's like when
Um,
you're living in the punk house, one of them starts to get too mainstream, and you got to take them down a bit.
yeah, exactly. And then the major part of this is the the accident and emergency. So yes, if you've fallen down during the game, then you've got to make an injury roll. And if you fail the injury roll, you're seriously injured and you have to go to the hospital. And you, as the boss, have to decide whether you're going to spend the caps to go private or just accept public healthcare. Um,
That's the most hidden social commentary ever in a miniature game, but I'm here for it. Do go
um,
on.
and so when you go to the hospital, you first make a diagnosis roll so that to tell the doctor where it hurts. That's essentially a location roll. And then you make a roll on one of the numerous D10 tables, depending on which bit of you is injured. And if you've gone private, you roll twice and choose the best result. But the tables, like they start terrible and you get really bad results. But then by about halfway up the table, you're basically just getting upgrades. So
Yeah.
quite often being injured is just great. You're just like, now I've got bionic legs. Amazing. And if you pay the money for private healthcare, then you're quite likely to
To get something better. Yeah, it's not end up with your brain replaced by a squig, which has been a classic trope of orc warband games almost of all time.
Yes, and
That's really funny.
Yeah, and in fact, Normal brain xenotransplant does appear on the table. Yeah,
Of course it does. It would have to. So,
it would be an offense not to.
for real. So let's talk about warband creation then, because obviously this is miniatures agnostic. You want people to use whatever orcs they want. And you talked about some like post game, after party stuff. Is there and there's a currency system?
Yeah.
So what can people expect when they start making their warband? Are they able to, or their warband, their gits, their group of gits, their git house, or whatever you're going to call this thing? Is there like equipment options and ranged weapons, and like what's sort of like the menu of options here for models if people are interested in like collecting up some stuff to get ready to play?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, the TLDR there is I've got a buttload of different shooting weapons and hand-to-hand weapons, and I might still invent some more special rules. It's weird because like the system's quite simple on its surface, but like when you start tinkering with a system like this, you can find all weird ways of bananaing around the rules and breaking things and creating special rules. And there's a ton of what I call fancy gear, which is the Cromlech orcs. Like I've built dozens and dozens of them at this point, and they all have like characterful extra bits and bobs. Like they might be carrying a big gas canister or a huge spanner, or they've got like a big syringe or whatever. Like we've all got orc models with like lots of other bits and bobs that aren't like necessarily military equipment. And so what I've done is I've created a huge array of like just bits of crap that you can take. They normally just cost 1 can, and that's like an orc costs 5 cans. Just to give you a caps. Sorry, caps.
Your Gaslands is showing. Your Gaslands is showing.
The intention being that, like, if you've got a model that is carrying a gas canister, like, you want that to do something in the game. And so there's a big old range of goofy stuff. And so, like, it can be like, I'm wearing a big hat, which means I can boss people around, that kind of stuff. I've got an improvised shield because I've kit bashed like a vehicle door as a shield.
Yeah, if somebody's got like a rope and hook on their belt, like you want there to be some kind of a rule for scorpioning somebody from across the room. There's got to be some kind of like fun stuff. And honestly, that's more probably to the mindset of collectors and orc aficionados out there, where having the goofy gear, like having a pogo stick or some kind of like ridiculous item on your person, is far more important than, ooh, look, it's a machine pistol. Like they don't care about that as much as they care about the weird stuff they're gonna get to fight with afterwards.
Exactly. And so like following this line of inquiry and frankly having had a really quite enjoyable time preparing to play Realm of Chaos about a year ago, when we actually played it, it was fine. We played one game, it was rubbish, and we played some Rotvolden instead. But I have created like 3 ways of building a gang in the rulebook. So you can go a la carte, just normal list building, blah blah blah. But you can also use the chef's recommendation, which is you essentially choose your gits and then they kind of get random equipment, or you can go full chaos mode and it's just
Yeah.
like, roll it up randomly and you might get like 3 squigs or like a dude in a tank, like whatever.
Yeah. Weirdly, Chaos Theory, which was the random, it was like the day zero stuff I did for last days, was one of the most popular things I made. And I'm sad I made it for free because it was the thing that people kept asking for expansions for. Because I do think people like that random, it shows up creation stuff. And that shows up in a bunch of games recently where I think the modeling side of it, which especially I think in this orky culture is going to be a big part of your audience for a game like this. They want the inspiration to then go and kit bash things. You know what I mean? So having that like baked into the rules where you get to kind of like have the pot stirred for you and just kind of see what comes out of the vending machine is like there's a big appeal to that. So it's really cool that you put it in there kind of as a through base to play.
You talk about this quite a lot, and I completely agree with it. Like the hobby loop that you go round, like for a certain kind of gamer, and I'm one of these, like having a random a random gang result to like trigger that loop, it just gives you like this really easy way to get it started again. Like I don't have to make a choice. I can just be like, okay, cool, let's have a gaming day in like 2 weeks. Let's roll up random things and we'll all do that. And that's a fun kind of hobby thing with your mates.
Well, and I think for a certain amount of people too, novelty is an energetic source, right? So the novelty of not knowing what you're going to get, opening the Cracker Jack box and seeing what's at the bottom, it's where inspiration comes from, and limitation is inspiration, right? So as soon as you have to do things and then mix them in a certain way, it's like opening your whatchamacallit, your freezer and seeing what's in there, opening your crisper and seeing what you got for vegetables, and that's what you're going to make dinner with. There is a certain amount of like inspiration that comes out of that.
Morally acceptable loot boxes is what I'm dealing with here, Ash.
Yeah, that's right. Loot boxes without charging people.
Yeah. The other thing that is kind of a bit more from like a slightly more chin scratching point of view is that like I want the game, like the game is ludicrous to play, but like you can play it sort of, you can play it to win, and I don't mind if you do play it to win, but I want it to sit in this nice halfway house where like people who are, playing 40k like at sort of like in a serious way with their mates can decamp to this game, but it's not like too airy fairy and flappy and like, oh, just do what you like and just be cool, man. But having the random generation stuff in also just says like, oh yeah, but like you can play this game in a completely airy fairy, just be cool, man kind of a thing. And that's important to me because I feel like there's this increasing sort of division between people who play competitive games and people who play narrative games, and I just don't think it's true. I just think we've ended up with a discourse that's kind of unhelpful in this regard, and so I want to put Space Gits like just nicely in the middle and just be like, yeah, it's got tentacles pointing in both directions. You can play it completely within the rules, but also the rules are like self-contradictory and collapsing in dice towers the whole time. So like it doesn't alienate people who are trying to play the rules because the game itself is like all kind of wibbly and falls over. Anyway, that's what I want to say on that topic.
Well, I would agree with you in that regard too, because what you're really talking about is widening an on-ramp in multiple directions and making sure, a lot like Gaslands, I think attracted people who'd never played a tabletop war game before and would just go and buy their dollar, Hot Wheels cars at Walmart. You've got this ability for the guy who's like literally for the orc player in the room, who's part of the gaming group, to make 25 orc models and just turn up and be like, all right, we're drafting, let's go. And we're going to have this game. And it ends up being, like the bachelor party game or the con evening game in a bunch of places because it's so accessible and so easy to play. And the guys who get diehard about it, but it doesn't matter because either side of that Venn diagram is equally sort of like welcome into the party.
Yes, that's my hope. And that's the great thing about the post game stuff is like so much of that like post game rolling is like then explaining what's going on and like figuring out what happens next and all that good stuff, which creates
So what's the pledge levels then? What's the offer here? Let's have a look at this and actually get to the nitty gritty of like what can people expect from this, because this is what the question's going to be. It looks like there's a hardback rulebook. Damn, how many pages is the rulebook going to be?
Well, it's going to be about 128. It depends how many joke painting guides we put in.
Joke painting guides and charts. Charts take up a lot of space. That's a good thickness for the amount of charts that we expect from a good chart-based war game.
Exactly, yeah. And of course, I need to put in the quick reference at the back, so that doubles your chart page count.
Nice. And then there's a core game bundle, which is the core bundle. You get the rule book, You get the Officer Crunk when he shows up and starts kicking people's head in. And then you also get the crumbling stuff, the Teleportaloo and the 2 vending machines.
Yeah, so this is like
the PDF for free. So if you want to recruit your
Yeah.
friends, you'll have a PDF rulebook that you can.
Yeah, and this is like the rule book plus like the really sort of specifically sort of themed to Space Gits, like City of Crunk stuff.
This feels like it'll be the most popular one right here. If you already have orc miniatures and you're like a classic orky fan. Then there's a 2-player starter set. So is Cromlech going to be doing like a collection of fun, cool models?
Well, so Cromlech already make a ton of orc bits, and they already make some lovely resin orky terrain pieces. So what I've done is I've created like 3 sets of their bits that I've assembled into like what I call the Grill Cooks kit and the Fuzz kit and the City Boys kit. And so you get enough pieces to build like 5 orcs that are themed with the right heads and good legs and bodies that suit. And once we finish the photography this evening, I'll post up into this page like what those crews can look like. But like it's not like a box of miniatures. It's just like here's the choicely assembled bits from Cromlech that are gonna be wicked.
So here's some of the cop miniatures that are definitely not painted in 2000 AD Judge Dredd colors, which I think is fantastic. Officer Crunk, who looks like he is the law, and it says Crunk on his little badge on his chest, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And
he's gonna roll a toilet roll on his belt.
And here's some of the Cromlech orcs. So you can see they're very like if you wanted to play other orky games with these, this is just gonna kickstart your collection basically.
Yeah, exactly. And you get a bunch of arms with them, including they designed some like beer and wine bottle holding arms. So you get a set of those with each of these kits.
I like that you've got, and then there's the grill cooks who have chef heads, fatties torsos, so they've all got their paunches hanging out, which is fantastic. African legs, close combat arms, and then beer bottles arms, so they might be hitting you with beer bottles.
Yeah, man,
that's fantastic.
Yeah,
and then last but not least, the City Boys, and the City Boys have their cool top hats.
That's right. Yeah, the gentle orc heads.
Yeah, and they've got like they're more stabby. It looks like they're holding their arms the stab way, not the slice way.
Yeah, they're
and some cool.
You can't trust them. You cannot trust them.
A collection of smoke break arms and beer and bottle arms, because of course that's the theme. So if you want to share,
yeah, this is great because like as we were chatting, I was just like, I'm building the orcs that I've got from Cromlech, and I'm like, there's this one great cigar holding like arm from one of the vehicle kits, and I was like, can we just have more of these? And they were like, yeah, definitely, here we are, take
done and done. Yeah. And then we got the City of Good Orcs, so some nice close-ups here of the 2 vending machines, which are clearly radioactive, as well as the Teleportaloo, which is probably highly dangerous and you don't want to put any part of your body inside of, but still must.
Sometimes you have to.
And they come with clear windows. That's really cool. So if you do want to like put in some perspex on the finished painted product, you can actually like have a clear glass
they provide the perspex and it fits exactly snugly.
And they can get you all kinds of things: first aid kits, super ammo, head-sized cooking pots, so you can have a helmet for free, an energy drink. Roll 66 move dice for your next 2 activations. That sounds horrifying. That sounds like you immediately die.
And Tasmanian devil.
Yeah, freaking out. A can of Spanish do double damage, and 777, and you win 3 bottle caps.
I was thinking of changing. So I was thinking of changing that 777 result, but then I noticed that they'd actually built into the machine. Like there's a little one-arm bandit built into the model. I was like, I can't change it now.
Have to. And so orcs are in this. There's also bull orcs, and bull orcs are bigger, stronger orcs, but are more expensive. You can have grots, so goblins, and then gremlins, who are smaller than goblins and they're totally legally distinct from snarlings. Gnawballs, which look a lot like critters, I'm sure, from the 1980s.
That's right. That's what they're based
on. Alien bounty hunter.
The tribbles, actually.
They're tribbles. That's where the trouble with tribbles. And then a clank bot, a large lift-a-lotus suit, a mechanical warframe for a goblin, or a fully autonomous construction robot. They're 10 caps. So that is really cool to know, because obviously it's more than just potentially the 5 orcs, you know what I mean, that are kind of like the core explanation. You can have other things in your group too, and you can have kind of a varied, cool, different looking gang when it's all said and done. Is there any kind of balancing mechanic for this? So like if I end up with more stuff than you at the start of the game,
So
how do you balance this out?
Yeah, so you can only at the start of the game, you can only deploy 5 Gits.
Right.
Except like some of the little Gits, they give you a discount of like the first gremlin or goblin doesn't count, so you can get 6 of them down. So that means if you like buy too much stuff, that's fine. You've got a bench, but you won't be able to put them all down in the same game. And then yeah, and then the balancing, like as gangs slightly diverge, then you've got the various balancing mechanics in the campaign system being
So what about vehicles? It says you can have bikes with sidecars, buggies, half tracks, jeeps, drag racers, trucks, buzz costers, and scrap tanks. Are
yeah.
these a future expansion, or do you start off with access?
No. Rules for these are in the book. I haven't. We didn't get enough painted, so like I haven't spread images of the like trucks through the Kickstarter, but I've got like 24 hours to fix that, and I've got a couple.
Yeah. Oh, you'll be fine. 24 hours, no problem.
Exactly, no problem. I'm not panicking.
No
Are you panicking?
Totally
I'm
fine.
not
Totally
panicking.
fine. I'm not panicking. This is great. This is perfect.
And so like over Christmas, I was putting together some of the Cromlech buggies, which are like pretty sweet, and it like as I was putting them together, it occurred to me how I could get this weird scooting dice mechanic thing where you roll the dice to work with vehicles. And so like over the last few months, I've elaborated on that system and developed it. And yeah, like again, watching you play Gorka Morka and seeing like what was fun and not fun about that system, and obviously having designed a fair few vehicle systems myself, I wanted to get something that was like, I want these vehicles just like I want the clamp box and I want the Norbles. Like I want any of your orc miniatures in your collection to be available to play in this stupid sort of situation, so that like if you have an orc army, you can play tons of different feeling games. Because like, oh well, this time I'm going to I'm going to bring a helicopter or whatever. Yeah, the big difference is basically, look, there's a sort of inertia system where whether the dice is in front of the vehicle or behind the vehicle, it gets resolved in a different way. And that means it's just a bit more annoying to go in like you can't instantly spin on the spot. And when the dice tower falls over, the tank doesn't fall over and get turned on its back or whatever. It wipes out, it goes out of control. Damn it, I can't remember what the actual rule is called. It's not called wipeout because it's legally distinct.
Legally distinct from Gaslands. You start bumping into your own rules. There are some great names in here too, though. You come with some stuff like the upgrades, fancy gear, things like megaphones, improvised bombs, overly long gun barrels, chunky armor, beast mounts, extra arms, hook hands, mono wheels, skull caps, steel jaws. So there is like lots of options for all of the visuals that are on your orcs too, to become like actual equipment pieces you have too, which is really cool. And then you've got 2, 4, 6.
What I want to say is, like, as people get involved on the Kickstarter, like I'm quite interested to get feedback for like more dumb stuff to add, because like it's not too late. I can still add more dumb stuff. So if you think there's something missing, come at me.
I want okay, so I'm gonna lock this in right now. You have to call the first expansion for this game More Dumb Stuff. The Book of More Dumb Stuff, Volume 1. The Book of More Dumb Stuff, Volume 2.
So I have actually already
Volume 3.
I have actually already started planning out the first expansion, and I was planning to call it "Here Come the Bastards," which I thought was a pretty good name.
It's a pretty good name, yeah. That's a good.
More Dumb Stuff is also an excellent name.
Yeah, the Book of More Dumb Stuff. It feels like you're speaking to your audience twice there with both those things. So 7 factions: the old boys, who are clearly like retirees and vets; the bad docs; the green wing, I ain't looting, I'm opposing a tyrannical government; the flyboys; the agitators; the riot mimes, I don't even know how to explain that; and the mushroom.
Well, they essentially have psychic powers. Like imagine if mimes were just psychic, like kinetic psychics.
So like the invisible wall, they're in a real wall, because
for everyone else it's a real
actual wall, because they're all just psychics, and each of these factions has special rules that could affect like your warband creation and like what you can do.
That's right. A faction is basically a conversion prompt, a theme, one special rule. You get one special rule, and there's those like 7 you just mentioned, plus the 3 that we talked about before: the fuzz, the grill cooks, and the the city boys.
That's fantastic. So yeah, this looks like it is like in a complete state, which I think is a really great sort of like reassurance for people that want to back it. You're working with like a veteran miniature company here whose sculpts are already done. So when it comes to Kickstarting, this feels less like a Kickstarter and more like a, hey, I got this game and this is the platform people do this in. What would you guys like? So so it's pretty much ready
to a
rock and
degree.
roll.
Like
Yeah.
I'm at the end of my runway here for like
Yeah.
the experiment of being a games designer. So there's a few things. One is I don't have an enormous amount of personal capital to risk on the print run and ending
Obviously.
up with a bunch of books in my shed and then having to go back to work.
That is
Um,
always the gamble.
yeah, and the other thing is that like I'm honestly got quite a lot of belief in the sort of the kettling and focusing of people's attention and enthusiasm around a Kickstarter campaign. I like think for the sort of game and the sort of community that I've grown, this is just a really nice way to kind of create a buzz around it and use the Kickstarter platform to like drag in some other interested parties. And that's one of the
Exactly.
coolest things. That's one of the coolest things with having Tyler Russo, $1 billion clown farm on the like on the team here, because you know he's got a really big 40k orc community, and like those
Mhm.
are the people that I want to speak to the most. Like if you've already got a bunch of orcs and you are already genetically disposed to this sort of nonsense,
Yeah.
then you are my people for this game.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reason I made the comment was too, your fulfillment sort of like expectations are a nice quick turnaround of like July to October of this year. So
Yeah,
like your
right.
plan
Like
is
there's
run the
not a big
Kickstarter and it's not like, it's not the, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not the usual Kickstarter thing where you're waiting like 2 years for your shit to show up. Yours is like, I'm at the end of the runway. This is the period at which I launch, and here's the sort of turnaround time that I'm expecting, which
yeah.
is
So like the
very
major
reassuring, I think, for people that are still waiting, for instance, to get like their last cool mini or not crowdfund that they're trying to find.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so like the major pieces of work still to do are like, 90% of the words are written. I just want to like I want the enthusiasm around the Kickstarter campaign to allow me to get some more playtesting and comments into the rulebook so I can tweak it. Actually, to that point, like you can download the quick start rules for free and play the
Yeah.
game, but also during the campaign I'm going to make the like full early access beta rulebook that doesn't have a very nice layout because it just got like exported from Google Docs, but I'm going to give
Right.
this away for free as well because I would rather have a wealth of people's input, and then they can have the beautiful version that has all of the actual final rules and the final artwork and everything.
Yeah. The
But
many
yeah,
eyes
like
thing is always useful.
oh, and it worked really well with Gaslands and A Billion Suns and Hobgoblin to like, you can feel like you want to keep all of the gaming material and all of the special rules and stuff back to yourself, but actually, like the game is much stronger and longer to survive if you kind of give that stuff with a good faith to the community to destroy it, and then they
Yeah.
will respect and come back, in my experience, and actually buy the book from you.
It tends to end up being more robust too, the more eyeballs are on it, because you'll kind of suss out all the corner cases that are usually where the gremlins in the machine are, which is really
Yeah,
good.
and
Well,
the
let's take
major the major work still to do is I'm going to lay the book out myself, which is not something I've done like soup to nuts with like a proper long book with a beautiful layout. But I'm excited to take all of my Photoshop and graphic design skills and just figure out how to best leverage them into laying out a book in InDesign. I mean, I've done a bunch of zines at this point anyway, and I've done a ton of graphic design over the last 20 years. So I'm not worried about it. It's just like there's some learning to do, and I'm going to be
it's
working
at
with
scale. Yeah, it's at
yeah, and I'm
scale,
going to be
and
working
then
with a printer in
it's how does a
Lithuania,
printer
and
have it come back? Yeah,
yeah. And the
that's awesome.
printer is the same dudes that made the Hobgoblin books. I know that the quality is going to be
Very high.
top notch. Yeah,
Yeah, very high. The Hobgoblin book looks fantastic. And in fact, there was a Hobgoblin tournament at Adepticon
there
this
was.
past. Yeah, there was a whole bunch of Hobgoblin events. It looked like it was very cool. Greg was up until I think midnight from Electi Studios running a
Nice.
I saw him very tired the next day, being like, I didn't know how hard it was to run a tournament. It was a lot of tournament, but it was so cool. He was very excited.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of photos from it. It looked absolutely epic.
Does look fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's take some questions from the chat real fast because I feel like we are at that point where we should be talking to people. We've got some alternate titles. Space Glitz will be the jewelry expansion, Malev says. Also Space Spliffs. Okay. Space Ritz, Nick Butler says, where all the minis are tiny cheese crackers. No, that did land, Nick. That wasn't just a UK-based reference. Canada also, because we're part of the Commonwealth, we have Ritz crackers.
That's weird. I actually have some right here.
Do you really? Oh, my kids love some Ritz crackers. The cheese ones in particular, although because we're built strong here, we also still have the peanut butter ones that kill half the children apparently in the school now. And then Nick Butler says Space Kits, the Gunpla expansion. That'd be cool. And Space Skibbity Gits is the Jab Scatting expansion, says Malev. So a lot of it's not too late to change the title. Space Bits, picking up pieces from the last game. That's a good one. Actually, that feels like that should be in the post-game sequence somehow. Space Bits. And then we had Space Zits. It's just teenage orcs tidying up their rooms. Yeah, not too bad. I like these alternate log lines, guys. Keep them coming. This is pretty cool. And actually, then Jez...
vaguely related to that, one of the things that I think I'm going to do, because I'm now independent, I can do whatever the hell I want. I'm going to open source the core rules of Space Kits. I'm going to call them Riot Dice, and I'm going to open them on like a Creative Commons license so that you can use and remix and commercialize to your heart's content, as long as I've got attribution. Because I think that the weird dice rolling and the dice stacking and all this kind of dexterity stuff, it's cool, and there are tons of other game things that you could do with them. So I'm just going to open source it like I did with the Chess 28 system and see if anyone wants to carry on doing it, because I'd rather see more games like this.
Yeah, it does feel like that dexterity based gameplay is like a real open field where there's not a lot of people doing stuff for it, and it would suit certain things too. Like there's not enough sports games. There really isn't enough sports games, and there really isn't enough more small unit fighting games like Street Fighter style. Like I feel like that dice would do like a Mortal Kombat. Like if you want to make like a Mortal Kombat miniature game, or a WWE, like a Monday Night Raw miniature game, a Royal Rumble style thing, that type of dexterity based like risk management plus dexterity sort of like core mechanic could be fun for all kinds of themes. So just put it out there.
And there's a lot of people who are experimenting, and I think this is cool as well. Like there's a lot of people experimenting with measureless movement, like free movement.
Yeah.
And this is sort of attacking the same question, which is like, how can I make it so I'm not like nip, trying to figure out every possible move and optimizing it. This sort of goes like, all right, I'll make one action, which is throw some dice, and then I have to I just have to move towards that kind of. It's less like, it has a different tactical feel. It's more kind of spongy in that regard. So I think it potentially could be a sort of alternative to measureless movement, which is kind of trying to solve the same problem maybe.
And it's funny because it's so teachable in person. It's one of those wide sort of net big tent kind of game ideas where you get more people accidentally playing miniature games because they don't have to read a rule book. Like that type of like dexterity or sort of like physicality based teaching. It's why checkers is so popular and why chess is so popular. There's no rule book for chess. You just visually inspect pieces and you memorize what their moveset is, and then you play the game. Like it's so easy to learn those games. So the same idea of like just having a physicality based sort of like rule system means that there could be a lot of like growth in that Venn diagram of people who would never try a miniature game before trying it, because it does remind me of certain games like what is it? Castles and Catapults. It's a tabletop war game. Like it literally is, but it's a dexterity based one where you're shooting little.
I mean, it's the oldest kind. Like I've got a copy of Little Wars on the shelf.
Little Wars is that too. Little Wars is
basically the same.
It's little matchstick cannons, and you're firing them at line up 10 soldiers. Yeah. Except there's a lot of cheating. He cheated a lot during those games, apparently. Like Winston Churchill claims that he was
my 5-year-old cheats at Space Kits as well. It's fun.
Yeah, it's fair. Who doesn't? I'm going to play Space Kits with Muscle Men probably, because I have a whole stack of Muscle Men I still haven't opened.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Millions of unusual creatures.
Yeah, actually, we just cracked open the copy of so about 2 years ago, but my girls were too young. Joey Maguire sent me Necromolds, and I finally got it out over the last few weeks of the holiday. And
it's great.
The girls obviously loved it. They're 5 and 7, so they were bang on.
Yeah, it's a perfect kind of game. Sweet. So the last couple of questions from the chat, and then we're going to wind this down, guys. We've got Malev says challenge accepted. He's already got an idea for using the system. So when it goes open source, Malev is obviously excited to give it a go. Ryan says you don't need to be an orc to be a git. You could easily have a bunch of drunken human miners on an asteroid base. Absolutely.
Definitely.
And then Jez Hunt says, it's full of great, silly, weird ideas. Sock stealing goblins or pie carrying halflings or whatever.
That's right. Someone in the Discord, in the Planet Smasher Discord, has been sharing photos of them playing a fully halfling version of this.
That's awesome.
Drunken
it does feel like there's kind of a reskinability, this kind of idea too, right? Where a decaying society can have their most wretched among them basically doing all kinds of like shenanigans with each other. Exactly. Well, sweet, man. Well, thanks for coming in. Good luck tomorrow. If you are watching this today, guys, you can I can link this in the preview in the video description so people can go check it out.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, and we'll do that. So people can go check it out. And then, we'll see you guys for our next Indie Hour next week. Bye, everybody.